Thank you for joining us on Checkpoint. I'd like to start with a quote. When the government gets to decide which speech is permissible, its exercise of the authority is almost always driven by political considerations and not principled distinctions. That, amongst other things, is what we will be discussing today on Checkpoint. How free is free speech? When does it go too far? Is the NCIC doing what it should in light of the recent events we have seen surrounding the Moses Kuria case and others that the NCIC has handled over the last few years? My panel tonight, Dr. Makodingo Washington. We have Apollo Mboya, who's from the Law Society of Kenya. We have Boniface Mwangi, who's an activist, and right next to him, Professor Gitile Naituli, who's a commissioner with the NCIC. Let's start with that. Should the government get to decide which speech is free speech? Let's start with you, Makodingo.
I don't think the government is deciding which speech is free speech. I think common human decency dictates that if you're going to say things, certain things in the public domain, that either you substantiate whatever it is that you're saying. If you can't substantiate, then you don't say them. But even if you're going to speak, you must respect the rights of other people and, you know, don't infringe on their rights. I'm saying the Constitution itself says you have freedom of expression, and then it goes ahead and severely limits that freedom, saying you cannot extend that expression to propaganda for war, hate speech, incitement to violence. If you respect those limits that the Constitution has set, the government doesn't need to come in.
Well, Makodingo, some would disagree in light of the recent arrest of Abraham Mutai for what he was saying.
I think his arrest was ill-advised, in my opinion. I think there are certain things that you let slide. He was giving information that is majorly in public domain. If someone feels offended, I think the right forum would be to go to court and file a civil suit, for example, and say they were defamed. Yeah, but the police shouldn't be walking around looking for public officers who have been annoyed, yeah, to arrest people on their behalf. I mean, it's a ridiculous practice. Okay,
all right. Bonnie, I'd like you to weigh in on that for just a moment. We'll come to you because this is a case that is recent and you were there with Mutai earlier today upon his release. What's your take on all this?
I don't think exposing corruption is hate speech, and I don't think the government should limit that. So you have realized that there's so much the media can write, and then you have this space called the internet where you can actually expose corruption, you can talk about every single thing that is going on. And so what Mutai was doing was actually tweeting about things in the public domain. And when he did that, he was arrested for doing that.
But were they things in the public domain though?
Some of them were.
Because to be fair, not many people knew about what was happening in Isiolo County, if he's to be believed.
He had documents that had evidence about corruption. One in Isiolo, and then there's another story about back in the 70s where the Mama Ngina Kinet was involved in poaching. And what Mutai did in a series of days, he tweeted about those things. And he was picked from Mombasa on a Saturday morning and brought all the way to Nairobi. And you cannot undermine corruption. So when you say that he's undermining a public officer and that he's actually misusing a public tool, or it was a licensed tool of communication.
License, I guess, telecommunication.
How is he doing that? Is he breaking any law? He's not.
Apollo, do you think our spaces are shrinking, particularly under this administration? Because that seems to be the allegation that is coming out, or what people are saying, that under this administration, free speech isn't as free as it should be.
Thank you. Freedom of speech should be elastic as much as possible. However, there are also red lines that we cannot cheat ourselves. Freedom of speech cannot be exercised in a manner that promotes terrorism, that can cause ethnic hatred, and that is also for maliciously destroying character. So as much as freedom of speech should be as elastic as possible, we know that there are red lines, and the law is very clear, even the Constitution, on its limits.
You recently had a press conference where you backtracked on a certain decision towards reconciliation in the case of Moses Kuria. Would you like to just talk a little bit about that without being sub judice and discussing what is going on with the court case?
Yeah, thank you. On the issue regarding Honorable Moses Kuria, the Law Society is the one that complained to the Director of Public Prosecution arising out of certain posting that were on his Twitter and Twitter handle and also on his Facebook. When the DPP received our complaint, they passed over the complaint to the National Cohesion and Integration Commission to look at it. And they both concurred that there was an offense that had been committed. And for that reason, Honorable Moses Kuria was charged in court. However, when the matter went to court, Moses Kuria, through his lawyer, did apply to the court for conciliation, which is allowed under the National Cohesion and Integration Commission Act. And he was given 30 days to do that. So he went back to the commission. The commission then also summoned the Law Society, and I represented the Law Society in that meeting. And we were very skeptical as the Law Society that Moses Kuria cannot be conciliated. However, we were cautioned by the commission that we should not start with a preconceived mind. The same day that we left that meeting, that is when Moses Kuria again was on it. And at that particular time, the commission did take a rightful decision that, yes, this matter now cannot be conciliated because of the continued disobedience of court order. And indeed, what we complained about was very different from what now transpired. We complained about the issue when Moses Kuria had put out a message that certain communities are the ones responsible for the grenades that were popping up all over the country. But during that time, after he was charged with that, and where he had advocated for violence, for the killing of certain community, he went ahead and again tweeted something with regard to the Mandera massacre. And the court actually cautioned him that he should not do that.
Okay, so I'd like to bring in Prof for just a moment, because if you take a look at the cases that the NCIC has handled in regards to hate speech, Fred Kapondi, Wilfred Machage, Chirao Ali Makwere, and then Moses Kuria, before you rescinded that decision, it's always they can give an apology. Chirao Ali Makwere actually gave an apology, and some are saying this is a slap on the wrist, and you're allowing particularly people in positions of power and influence to get away with serious crimes, while Alan Wadi gets jailed for 2 years. Is an apology going to solve an issue when somebody has allegedly incensed one community against the other?
Yes, I think it's, the Kenyans need to understand the act under which we operate, and also our primary mandate. Our primary mandate is actually to bring Kenyans together. Now, it's not our philosophy, therefore, to actually take people to court. So what we do when they have breached the law, when Kenyans have breached the law, those you do, then we compile the evidence, we add it over to the Director of Public Prosecution. From there, we are actually not actors anymore. But the act actually allows that the person is so accused to request conciliation. And when that is done, is granted by the court, then we facilitate, we house it. Now that's what has happened to the people you mentioned. Because they have lawyers, because I can see the major difference between Wandi and them is that they have legal counsel.
Right.
And the lawyers know the sections of the law which they can apply to save their clients, the conciliation process, which now comes to us, then we do it. But also about Wandi. Wandi was accused under 2 counts. One count is under the penal code. The other one fell on the NCIC Act. So these are two different things. The two different between Mashage, Kapondi, and the others.
Right. Prof, is an apology enough?
I think we hold the opinion that to bring peace, and I think that the framers of that law, what they had in mind was that because of the actions of 207 and 208, is that it was important when the people actually realize they have erred and they genuinely believe it. I mean, even if I have to go to the Bible a little bit, that you know, there is no sin that cannot be forgiven if you genuinely believe and accept that you have erred, you have committed an offense against Kenyans, and you genuinely seek forgiveness, it can be granted.
Bonnie,
You
have a look.
I think that applies to the rich and the elected. And if apology was working, I don't think Moses Kuria would have actually left the commission and dared to write those things that he wrote. I think the commission is very lenient to the big shots who make mistakes. The commission is very political, it's politicized. They have a political who's like a Paro, who has actually been saying that the journalists have the journalists have been actually putting the question on the spot, because right now Moses Kuria should be in jail because it's very repetitive, and what he's doing is over and over again.
But the court process has to come to its logical conclusion.
It's very true. It's very true. But if you look at what he has been doing the last 1 year, he has been very consistent in his insults. Before that, he was recording a conversation talking about how they could get a lie sodomized. And he was reported at Central Police Station. Nothing happened to him. Moses Kuria threatened me. I took him to Central Police Station. Central, and then I went to Parliament Police Station. Nothing happened to him. And you can see how the law applies to these people. And when I went to Parliament Police Station, he told me he's the president's friend. There's nothing you can do about it.
And then you wrote this letter to the president that we have on screen. Have you received a response from the president?
No, a month later I haven't received a response from the president. And the people who have threatened me, I'm lucky that Mita has been arrested, which is very good, because when you get arrested, you can go through the due process. They have been sending people to me to threaten me, personally. And then there are people that work for the president, people who are known to me, and I had the evidence to do that. So that's why I wrote the letter, took it to William Tunga, who sent it to the president. But he hasn't replied yet.
And he hasn't replied, and you're still waiting for that.
Yes.
Makodingo, at what point does an insult become an offense?
An insult is always an offense. I mean, if you came and told me I was, like, I will quote the Pope. If you insulted my mother, I'll most likely not think twice about it. You will fight. Yeah, I'll punch you in the face. But let me weigh in on the Moses Kuria case. Moses has been my friend for a while, for a long time now. And I have defended him many times. Yeah. Whenever he was accused of being a tribalist. Many times on social media I've defended him. And for a while, in fact, I actually believed that part of the reason he was saying the things he was is because he wanted to endear himself politically to the people of Gatundu South so that he could be elected, which, you know, you could even forgive. But after he's gotten elected, he's gotten worse. Yeah? So I think, for me, it's reached that point, you know, where the Pontius Pilate moment, where you wash your hands off someone. Yeah. Given his last postings, especially his Genesis 17:14 posting, I really think he need, right now, in my opinion, as a friend, I would prefer to be visiting him in a solitary confinement unit at Kodiaga GK prison. Because what he did, and the basis upon which his statements were made, yeah, are essentially the kind of statements that have caused genocide, that have caused ethnic cleansing the world over. Yeah, he's used a religious text to essentially say we need to cut off an entire community. Yeah, that for some reason, I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't even want to repeat it, but I think it's ridiculous. I think this notion, part of the changes we must do to the NCIC Act, when we're amending it, is to remove this process for apologies. Yeah, if he wants to apologize, he should go to every uncircumcised male in this country, every house, and personally apologize to each and every one of them. This thing of reconciling with the LSK, LSK was not offended. Yeah, an entire community was offended. A community of millions of people, yeah, was offended, and in fact, is actually advocating the extermination of a community on the basis that they are not circumcised. How can a leader, a person holding a position of a member of parliament, go to a public forum and say things like that? It is unacceptable. He has, you know, the red line, you know, when Lengu kept telling us the red line, I don't think he's crossed the red line. I think he's even left it behind. He's way, way, way behind.
Prof.
Yes, you know, in the utterances I'm seeing in the social media, including the one who is discussing, there is something as a country we need to understand and get clear. And that is that a president or an opposition leader will always come from a certain community, and also possibly even a certain race. We have Indians in this country, so it's conceivable an Indian will be president someday, or will be a leader of the opposition someday. We also have Europeans in this country. It's conceivable that one of them will either be president or opposition. We are unable to exercise the freedom of speech by challenging policies without bringing in the leader and taking that leader to the community. You see, the leader does not represent the community. Whether the leader is in the opposition or is in the government, he represents policies of that government. So a lot of us, we are unable to separate these two, and then we continue insulting, which is an offense, and which is also forbidden, actually, in Article 33, which guarantees freedom of speech. Section 2 of that, it in fact forbids you to make incitement or demeaning statement against another community. Right. So we have this idea that if I disagree with you, then I disagree with your entire community.
All right,
that's
Prof,
wrong.
Prof, it's clearly not working.
Yeah.
This idea of making apologies. In fact, it seems to embolden one leader after another. Do you think it's time for the NCIC to start to ask for the powers to have punitive measures? I'll tell you why. Chirao Alemakwere, when he apologized in 2012, was, according to the record, supposed to be a hate speech ambassador. To date, I'm not sure I've seen any activity between Chirao Alemakwere and your commission in terms of speaking out. So is it just face value? Oh, I'm sorry, and then we move on? If the apology thing is not working, why can't laws be put in place to make sure the NCIC has more powers or more teeth to bite?
Yeah, I don't know whether I have permission from NCIC to say this, but we are actually in the process of amending that law, of proposing tougher sanctions, because you know, we went to Rwanda the other day as a commission, and I tell you what we saw was frightening. That is possible, like Apollo is saying here, for just 2 or 3 crazy loose tags to bring all of us down. It's very possible. So we're in the process of doing exactly that, and we think it should be done. But I think what also may be bringing this free speech and so on so much to the awareness of Kenyans is the government is also getting a bit serious on implementing existing laws. The sins that brought almost this country to on knees in 2007 and 2008, those sins were planted in the referendum of 2005. It's not that we lacked laws then, because section 96 of the Penal Code on incitement was still there. But the government, for whatever reason, not known to anybody, they did not implement that section and arrest that situation, so it matured.
The government is now getting more serious in terms of curbing
getting
that?
More serious?
There's some people who would disagree with you on that and who would think we're going back to the dark days. Apollo, do you think that is the case? Vincent on Soti on Twitter says Kenya should not go back to the dark days, and there's that belief now. Remember when it was even seditious to think certain thoughts?
It still is, actually.
Well, depending on which way you look at it, your thoughts are supposed to be, you know, absolute, the freedom of thought. But
I don't think that is a very strong statement to say that we are going back to the dark days. For me, I'll agree with Mark Odingo. You see, if you are a public leader, if you're a public officer, you must allow some form of criticism. I can tell you, even me as the secretary of the Law Society, I see some of the criticism even from our own membership, okay? But as PLO says, you don't hit a mosquito with a hammer. There are certain things that you just let go. We have to look at every speech within its context and what it can cause. If it is a speech that is likely to incite violence, then you can say that.
So an act on it.
Yes. Or it incites, you see. But we cannot just purport to say that any abuse can warrant somebody to be arrested.
So they should be a little more, you know, thick skin.
Yes.
Bonnie, does Do members of the government have thick skin to take some of the insults?
No, I don't think so. I think this particular government is extremely intolerant. They're sensitive to being insulted. I think you cannot undermine the president. Someone like Alan Wadi, how do you undermine a whole president? So I
He
think
did say some incendiary things about
he did,
the president.
and I don't agree.
He did use some expletives.
And I do not support irresponsible speech. I do not support him at all. But I think there's a place where you should actually develop a tougher skin. When a leader like Moses Kuria says some of these things, he can cause violence. That's Kuria. But for a nobody, a non-starter somewhere, ignore him. I think there should be room for people to...
So is it then...
For example,
does it
I'll
then
give an
become
example.
selective?
In the
way
last
you're
1
saying,
week, I've been
because-
asking the deputy president of this country, William Ruto, about the grabbing of the Langata Primary School. What did he do? He blocked me. That's intolerance. He's a public officer.
However, he also has the right to not listen to what you have to say.
But he,
doesn't
but he sits on a public office, which I happen to pay taxes, and I pay his salary. So as a public officer, you should listen to me. And there should be room for dissent and room for people to insult you and just don't feel anything about it. Because at the moment you're elected by millions of Kenyans, there's no way a single guy called Mwangi somewhere or Wadi or whoever it is can undermine you being elected by millions of Kenyans.
Bonnie, let's understand it though, because I remember now you're saying the freedom to, of course, to dissent.
And to offend,
yes,
at least.
And to offend, at least. When we had you here on this panel,
Just try.
remember during the Migori issue, for you also throwing the shoes at the president was also an expression of how
Because-
they felt about him.
And the same article...
Where do you draw the line?
And the same article gives you the right to dissent creatively, the right to creative expression. And that shows a creative
that was
expression.
creative?
Yes, it's the same article.
You know, I'll tell you what the right, Yvonne, I'll tell you what the right to dissent actually means. And this is why I think we are maturing as a democracy, we are growing. This is what it means. The right to dissent, it simply means when the government proposes a policy that you don't like, you either propose a counter policy or you analyze that policy and tell us what is wrong with it. It doesn't extend to insulting anyone. You see, because you need to respect the other person's opinion as much as you want your opinion. Now that diversity, the fact that there can exist two truths, okay, and those two truths are held by two different people, we are not accepting that. We think we own our truth.
Professor, we lived in a country for 10 years where we had a president who used to call us Mavia Kuku na Pumbavu. We did not take him to court. We did not complain. We did not come to national court and say that the president is insulting a whole country. So there's room for that.
We should have?
No, we should have. You know,
There's still room.
the former president was...
Still
The
I think it was generally on a light note.
well, some might disagree, Makodingo.
Yeah,
Isn't it a matter of interpretation, though?
Yeah, it is. And generally, that is where the courts come in, yeah, so that they can actually arbitrate, yeah. But I don't agree with Boniface that there are certain people who say certain things that should be ignored, yeah. I didn't know this Wadi guy, yeah. In fact, I wouldn't have taken him to court for certain sections of what he said, yeah. Where he crossed the line for me was when he said that the president need to be killed. Yeah? I mean, that really is treason. In fact, for the people who are protesting, I think the prosecution was extremely lenient, yeah, in the charges they preferred against him. I mean, you can say a lot of things. You can say rumors, yeah? And I wish Kenyans were smart enough to use words like allegedly, you know, it is rumored. You can communicate the same point, yeah, without necessarily committing yourself.
But I should say this. There's a guy called Paul Kobe who said that he killed Fidel. And the day he was arrested, he was taken to whatever police station, and it was released that he was a madman taken to Madare police station, whatever it was, to see a psychiatrist, whatever it was. My point is, if Paul Kobe is given that leeway, that maybe he's mad and maybe he went berserk and all that, and is given another way of actually trying to...
Yeah. The same was not done for Alan
Wadi.
Wadi,
Looked like a mad guy who was smoking bang. There's a way he could have actually helped the guy. But the same affliction that Wadi suffers, the same affliction that Kobe suffers, but Kobe seems to be close to the president.
My friend, if you looked at those posts, they were written in good English, very good grammar. Yeah?
Mad people
utter things. They don't sit down and compose.
Mad people compose.
They don't sit down and compose.
Gentlemen, I'm not sure any of us is qualified to discuss exactly how mad people operate, because none of us is a psychiatrist. So
I think, Yvonne, there is one problem also we have as a country and as Kenyans, respecting the rule of law. Because contesting the sentencing of Wandri, like you are doing, or saying that he suffered a different treatment as what is his name again?
Paul
Kobia.
Yes.
The facts are not the same. If you shout in Emba, you couldn't some guy who died in Mombasa and you are in Nairobi. You're obviously insane.
Is that so?
You are close to being
have
Something
someone.
that you would be able to
there
say,
with the fellow.
well, I'm not sure.
So
I'm not sure.
someone.
So what I'm saying though is we cannot really defend breach of law. In all fairness, we should not defend breach of
Okay.
law.
All right.
But
Because
can I
respect
ask
for
one
law.
question for this panel?
And then
How
follow.
come the anti-corruption laws are not working? The hate speech laws are working, the defamation laws are working, all other laws are working, but the ones that deals with corruption and corruption in public office, they're not really working.
Yeah.
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Apollo?
Do you have some?
And we want to.
Yes, Langata playground has been grabbed. And tomorrow the kids are going to school and they have no place to play. So tomorrow we're going to play with the kids because they have no play field.
What I want to say is this. On the issue of the law,
Yes.
and I have to start with what the commissioner talked about, we must safeguard from over-legislating. We have a DPP, and a competent one, and a very good office. And the Constitution provides that the DPP is the only constitutionally mandated authority to commence prosecution.
Yeah.
All these other bodies like NCIC do not need any other teeth. We don't need to amend even the law.
So you disagree with what Prof is saying
Yes,
about the NCIC?
they need to use the law that they have right now, okay? And where anything warrants prosecution, they give it to the DPP. I have very, very, very high regard for the office of the DPP right now, and I'm sure they can prosecute.
All right.
And that is why he has been given the security of tenure for these purposes. Okay? And coming back to the other laws, yes, question of implementation. Sometimes people don't have the spine. He's talking about the anti-corruption.
Yes.
Yeah. And who are the institutions that have been given this mandate? Every institution that has been given a mandate to do a particular issue must be able to come out and handle those matters.
And that should be your final comments because
Yes.
I'm told we're completely out of time. But I think what Bonnie was trying to say is corruption is fighting back, particularly in certain regions. Makotingo?
I think there is a fallacy in Boniface's argument, yeah, that so and so did something wrong, we didn't do anything about it, so we shouldn't have done something about so and so also doing something wrong. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Okay.
Can I respond quickly?
No.
No.
if someone, I think what we should advocate for, yeah, is equal treatment under the law.
Before the law.
Yeah,
All right.
that everyone who does something wrong is treated equally. Yeah, and prosecutions are commenced. Let them defend themselves. Yeah, if the court agrees with them, they'll be freed. Yeah, if the courts don't agree with them, they'll be sent to jail.
All right.
Yeah, but we need to have. I mean, I don't want to comment on the case he's talking about, but you cannot. We cannot continue excusing bad behavior.
No.
As a
Listen,
nation,
for
and someone
51 years as a
imagines that
country, we are only
developing.
jailing poor people. 51 years as this country has existed, we only jail poor people.
I
That's my
actually
problem.
don't think Boniface that is true because Yvonne just went through. She outlined us all the people who have been arrested.
But they were not charged, they were released.
All those are not poor. They are members of parliament.
Reconciliated.
No, they
with them.
were charged. They were charged and they appeared in court.
They were not jailed.
So we need to respect the legal process.
All right.
That legal process, we let them go scot-free. That's what the commission did.
No, but that is the legal process. When we respect the legal
But you see,
process,
the legal process is very favorable to the rich.
All right, gentlemen. Honestly, it is one of those discussions I'm not sure we can complete.
Yeah.
And I've completely run out of time. I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming and for your great insights. So tomorrow you're not going to see Abraham Mutai. Tomorrow you're going to the playground.
Langata, please, Kenyans, join me. Let's claim it back for the kids.
Oh, thank you. Let's do it for the kids.
Do it for the kids.
Thank you very much. Boniface Mwangi, Apollo Mboya, Dr. Makodingo Washington, and Professor Gitile Naituli, Commissioner of NCIC. We're getting to your views in just a moment, but I think we need to take a break before John Alanamu comes back with What's the Point? Back after this.
We're very robust discussion there led by Yvonne Okwara. They left it all out there, and very simple points to be made on what's the point today. And the first one I'm going to get into is the tenet of free speech and the respect for the rights of others. That one right has to be balanced by one responsibility is something that is espoused the world over. But why not in Kenya? That's something that people ought to ponder on. Why the intolerance whenever one person expresses one point of view? Is it viewed with such in such an intolerant nature? And why is it that, for instance, specific people seem to be the target of this intolerance online and in the conversations that we have in the public space? The second one is on hate speech. What is hate speech exactly, and how do we define it in our own context? Generally and globally, hate speech is defined as a speech that would cause anxiety or the speech that would lead to violence, and it targeted specifically at communities or subsets of society. But where does dissent stop and hate speech begin? That's another conversation that we need to have if we're going to be able to get forward and have some go forward on this discussion of freedom of speech and how free is freedom of speech. And finally, the people who represent us in Parliament and in various public sectors have a public trust that was placed upon them by members of Parliament, by members of the public, beg your pardon. And it so follows that in doing that, in members of the public placing that public trust on them, there is a certain level of responsibility that is placed upon them, specifically with freedom of speech. We've seen our leaders in the past take too many liberties with freedom of speech and go in borderline on hate speech. The discussion that was had on Checkpoint focused quite a bit on Moses Kuria as an example of a person, a leader who has taken too much of a liberty with his freedom of speech, and understanding as leaders that the responsibility that they have to be able to lead their constituencies, to understand and appreciate that one's right and one's responsibility ought to be balanced pretty much on the same way, is something that's important for them to be able to coexist with one another, and that is the point.